Aloha. You're watching F5 On Demand, and welcome to an inside look where we take a little deeper dive into some of BIG-IP's technology. I'm Technical Marketing Manager Peter Silva, and today we're going to take an inside look at BIG-IP Access Policy Manger's PCoIP Proxy for VMware Horizon View, available in our BIG-IP 11.4 software. And we're fortunate to have Paul Pindell, who's a solution engineer, right, Paul?
Solution architect, actually, on the biz dev team.
Well, excuse me, a solution architect on the biz dev team handling the F5 VMware partnership, right?
F5 VMware partnership. I've been focused for the last year on our end user computing space with VMware View.
And so this new PCoIP proxy support, this is all about VDI, right?
Yeah, it's all about VDI. It's all about providing a secure front-end access layer for a VDI infrastructure.
All right, so let's take a look. I noticed we have a few slides before we get into the actual BIG-IP config and such. So you want to go through those real quick?
Sure, let's do that. So our first slide here is just talking about that we're the industry first to provide this full proxy support for PC over IP. So we're providing a solution that is a replacement for VMware View's security servers. So a VMware View security server is a Windows device that traditionally sits in the DMZ and proxies view connections from the client to the back-end desktop. And in working with VMware and Teradici is the owner of the PC over IP protocol. They've developed it, they license it to VMware. VMware uses it in their Horizon View product.
And so just to take a step back, the PCoIP protocol is the protocol that's used to actually paint the screen, right? Coming from the virtual environment, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it transmits the key presses, the mouse clicks, the video resolution, and all that back and forth. You can also embed the USB redirection in it. So if you had a zero client and you plugged a USB device in, it would connect that USB device to the virtual desktop.
And so you were talking about the architecture before I interrupted you about PCoIP, but you were talking about hardened servers or insecure servers within the architecture, right?
Sure. So up till now, the solution has been to use a VMware View security server in the DMZ. That security server has been installed on a Windows 2008 R2 device. And as we know, those in the DMZ, there are several customers that won't put a Windows device in their DMZ. Fed customers come to mind, DoD, those sorts of customers. In order for them to deploy VMware View, they've got to go through a lengthy exception process to get that policy overturned for a VMware View deployment. It lengthens the time that it takes to sell into a View environment in a Fed space. And in some cases, it just eliminates VMware View as a contender in a VDI space, which means that they go to Citrix more often than not. So what we've done, and the APM team has done, is provided a full proxy for PC over IP. It's built into the APM product, and what it does is proxies the connection between the client. So what we've always done, so we're a full proxy architecture, takes the client, terminates it on the client side, and then reestablishes a new connection between the BIG-IP and the virtual desktop on the back-end side.
And then so being that proxy architecture, and we talk about this all the time amongst the various numerous protocols we support, that then enables us to then actually dig deep into the traffic, inspect the traffic, manipulate the traffic, and do our magic to make sure it gets to the end user properly.
So terminate it on the outside, on the client side, dig deep into the protocol, determine what we want to do with those packets, and send them on to the correct destination on the server side.
So over the last year or so, I know that BIG-IP Access Policy Manager has supported the PCoIP protocol, but it was encapsulated, right? And we were sending it over the DTLS with APM?
Correct. So in previous versions with the VUI app and other methods, we were creating a DTLS tunnel, so a full network access tunnel. And that tunnel allowed for us to encapsulate the PC over IP protocol and send it over that UDP-based VPN. PC over IP is a UDP-based protocol, and about 2 years ago, VMware came to us and said they were having trouble with external users being able to access securely their View resources inside the data center. And many people were trying to do VMware View PC over IP protocol through an SSL, a traditional SSL VPN, and it was destroying the performance. Yeah, as you can imagine, putting UDP in TCP just doesn't work. So they came to us, asked us to develop this solution. We worked collaboratively with them. We came up with a solution that we brought to market about a year and a half ago for that DTLS solution. It works great in all cases except the zero client. So because the zero client, we can't put our VPN driver, our edge client, on say a Teradici or Wise zero client. That means that we can provide remote access, secure remote access through DTLS for everything but the zero client.
Got it.
This new PC over IP protocol will take care of that limitation. So we've got a couple diagrams here, and we'll talk about those. Here on the left, the first diagram, you can see that we've got a traditional infrastructure with an LTM in the middle.
Okay.
So you've got your DMZ environment, you've got your LTM that load balances sets of View security servers. And you notice that we've got 2 View pods here. And we've got a lot of security servers. Each security server each security server is paired one-to-one with a connection server, and together they can handle up to 2,000 connections each. In this diagram, you'll see that there are 7 security servers, 7 connection servers in each View pod. VMware allows for 7, and they allow for 5 of them to be active at any one time, 2 to be in standby, for a maximum of 10,000 users per View pod. One of the things we've done with our latest iRules-based solutions, the username persistence solution, is we found a way to, in a situation where in a data center you've got more than 10,000 users, more than 2 View pods, we found a way to tie those together and make them appear like one to the end user. Not what we're going to talk about in this solution, but this is the diagram that you would use to show that. So essentially the View clients coming in from the outside, they go through a firewall, they hit the LTM, and the gray line is the one that we're talking about here, not the green line yet. The gray line goes to the LTM determines to which View security server to send that traffic, depending on source IP, geolocation, all those sorts of things, standard load balancing things that we do. The traffic goes from the View security servers over their IKE tunnel, so they create an IKE tunnel between the View security server and the connection server, an IPsec tunnel, and the connection servers, essentially they call it a broker, it determines which virtual desktop the user that's logging in gets. So it determines which desktop that they get. Sends that information back to the View client, tells them this is the desktop you get, this is a specific key, a token that you need to use to reconnect, and then the user reconnects on the green line, the PC over IP protocol line. They reconnect, it's a different port, 4172 instead of 443. They connect on that port directly to the View security server around the BIG-IP at this point. So this is the diagram as it was in 11.3 and prior. The next one we move over, we've got the LTM plus APM, and in this situation, you notice in the DMZ we have removed all of those View security servers. All we have are View connection servers now. So we no longer need those View security servers. One, makes your DMZ more secure because you don't have Windows servers in your DMZ. We're a hardened box. We can be a FIPS compliant box in the DMZ. We've got LTM and APM on the device. And you'll notice that both the gray line, which is the 443 XML authentication traffic, and the green line, the PC over IP traffic, is going through the BIG-IP at this point.
The steps you mentioned earlier, it's still the same steps, but instead of making, a couple of jumps back and forth to the BIG-IP and then the end around, everything is now managed within the BIG-IP itself.
Everything's managed within the BIG-IP itself. One thing to note is now the BIG-IP needs to have APM as well, and you're putting all the traffic through the BIG-IP. So that BIG-IP needs to be sized appropriately for the bandwidth you're putting through it. PC over IP will use quite a bit of bandwidth, up to 2 megs per View desktop, unless you limit it.
And then if a user loses his connection to, say, pod 1, the intelligence within BIG-IP, that key you mentioned earlier, keeps that session alive, and then they can reconnect somewhere within pod 2.
So correct, that's the username persistence solution would allow them to do that. So the PC over IP proxy solution will make sure that they get back to the desktop.
To their assigned desktop.
Make sure they get back to that View pod. The third diagram is showing that you can further collapse since the big IP, you put AFM on the device, it can be an ICSA certified firewall. You can remove the firewall from the DMZ and make the big IP itself the firewall.
Wow.
in this environment. So you can remove the firewall in the DMZ, the front and the back end of the DMZ, and collapse your entire thing. So all you have in the DMZ is your hardened big IP security device.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So can you show me, how you configure it, where you set it up, and those sorts of things?
Let's do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you where to find this manual. And if you go to the Ask5 knowledge base and look for the APM supported products, go to the 11.4 supported products, you'll find let's go back one, I'll show it to you. You'll find a link to the BIG-IP Access Policy Manager, VMware Horizon View Integration and Implementations Guide.
Got it.
And we're going to walk through that guide as we configure this. But I just wanted to show you where you can get it. Go to downloads, you can download the virtual edition if that's what you're going to run it on, and get it up and running. I've got a View infrastructure here. We're talking to my lab infrastructure. Within it, I've got several different things going. We're going to look at the VMware Horizon View administration screen first.
Okay.
So I've logged in to my local host. It says local host here. I've logged in actually to my View connection server that I'm going to connect to, and I'm going to go ahead and log into the administration GUI screen. If I kept the
Yeah, I often forget to give it that extra little click when you switch screens. Give it that little extra one click to make sure that. Yeah, right.
So one of the things that you need to do in order for this solution to work is make sure you disable all the tunneling mechanisms that are built into the View product itself. So we want to disable that security server tunnel and disable the what they call the PC over IP security gateway mechanism. So we're going to go to the View configuration screen, click on servers. We're going to go to connection servers. You notice I've got two of them here. I'm only going to show you doing this on one in this environment because we're actually connected to this environment through this one, and I don't want to screw with it while we're connected. So I'm just going to show you one of them. I'm going to click Edit. And you'll notice that there's a HTTPS secure tunnel, PC over IP secure gateway, and the BLAST secure gateway. BLAST is the HTML5 access gateway. We're going to go ahead and disable all three of those.
Okay.
So uncheck those boxes. That means that these entities here are not being used right now. We're going to click OK. Yeah, I should also show you, if I go to Edit, that on this screen we can also choose authentication methods. So this will be important as we move forward, and I show you some features within the big IP itself. So we can do smart card authentication with View, but two-factor authentication, so we can do RSA and radius. So View can do RSA and radius, or we have the ability to offload that functionality from the View infrastructure and do that at the edge. So we can do RSA and radius authentication at the edge and do simple Windows domain authentication to the back end.
Oh.
So we'll show you those options and where you can find them on the as you configure the big IP. So we'll cancel that. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to look at a big IP here. I want to look at this one. And the first thing you'll need to do as you configure this big IP is you'll need to make sure that you have the certificates on there and that you've created a client-side SSL profile. So it doesn't talk about doing that in the guide. It just assumes that you're going to have certificates on the box and you're going to have that client-side certificate and profile done there. So here it is. I've got my wildcard. You'll notice I've got certificates and keys, my wildcard. I've also got a chain certificate in here. That's the SSL profile that you need to have set up before you start this process.
Okay.
The other thing you need to have set up before you start this process is you need to have your Active Directory AAA server set up. You get that set up here. So bd.f5.com is my domain, and we've got that pool of Active Directory servers configured already.
Got it.
So the next step is actually creating a pool of servers, of View servers that you'll connect to. And so let's go ahead and do that. Traffic pool. We're going to create a new pool. And that pool is going to be we're going to give it a name here. This is going to be a pool of View connection servers. We're going to give it it's going to be least connections, new node. The nodes I'm going to use, if I look at my cheat sheet, a piece of paper here, 10.105.134.182. Service port is going to be 443 and 183. I'm going to add those two members to the pool here.
Yep.
And we're going to click Finished. Next thing that we need to do is create an access policy, application access, a remote desktop resource. So we go to the access policy screen, access profiles, remote desktops.
Yeah, right there. Application access.
Application access, remote desktops, and remote desktop. We want to create a new remote desktop access profile. We're going to call this, we're going to select from this list. So this is a VMware View. This is where you would set that up. We want to enable the server-side SSL checkbox and auto logon. We want to enable that box as well. And you notice it populates the username source and domain source. We want to keep those as they are at this point. English access profile. If you were to configure this with your own image, you could do that. We're not going to at this point.
Got it.
Click Finished.
This is what I love about BIG-IP, especially since version 10, is the fact that if you miss something, if you, oops, I forgot, it tells you right there what you have to do in terms of correcting the errors.
Yeah, so I need to have chosen a pool name here, and we're going to make it that View Connection Servers pool. So, forgot to do that.
Happens to the best of us.
Oh, yes, it does. Perfect. Next thing we need to do is create a full Webtop. So we get access policy, Webtops. There's our Webtops. And we need to create one. We're going to create a new Webtop. That Webtop, we're going to give it a name.
And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with BIG-IP Access Policy Manager, the user would log in from their customized logon screen, and once they pass their authentication, they are who they say they are, they're then presented with their dynamic Webtop, which would include all the various resources that they have access to, whether it be email, internal web applications, their Citrix VDI environment, their VMware VDI environment, among many other resources available to the user.
We'll make sure we check the full Webtop solution here. And we're going to click Finished.
Okay, so far we did certificate. Let me see if I can remember. We did certificate, and then we did authentication, right?
AAA service,
AAA, yep, authentication, AAAs. Then we did the pools.
Yep, created a pool.
Created the pools, and then we set up the resource, and then we now set up the Webtop, the display for the resources.
Yep, and now we're going to create the actual access profile that we'll attach to a virtual here later.
Got it.
So this access profile, we're going to create a new one. I'm going to call this the View 5.2 access profile. We need to choose a language. Essentially, that's all you need to do here. English is the language I use, so we're going to choose that one. And click Finished.
I'm actually illiterate in 3 different languages.
There you go. I love it. So after the access profile, we need to go through and create an access policy on that access profile. Okay. So we're going to go edit that access profile. This opens a new window. We call it our Visual Policy Editor, and allows us to edit the policy we use and put in different things like talk to Active Directory and check this user first before you allow them to continue. So we're going to do some of that here right now.
And this is amazingly easy, the VPE.
It is. So the first thing we're going to do is between the start and deny, I mean, that's a pretty basic profile right there. We're going to go ahead and, our policy, we're going to actually insert an action. And that action we'll choose from this list here. Okay. The first thing that we're going to do is I need to look for what it is I'm doing first. What I need to have in there first. I need to type in the word client. That's what I need to do. And we need to choose. We're going to do, no, we don't want the view logon screen for yours. We're going to do a client type check is what we're going to do. Make sure that the clients that are trying to connect are the correct type of clients, and make sure that we send them based on whether or not they're Mac, Linux, iOS, that we send them down different branches because they're going to use different methods of connecting.
Yeah, so an inspection, actually.
So yeah, it's a client-side inspection, and it determines what kind of client we're going to allow into this environment. You notice one of the client types is this VMware View client type. And on this branch where it says the VMware View client type, what we're going to do is add an item, and that's going to be the View login page. So we click Save on this, go to VMware View, and we're going to add a VMware View logon page. So this is a new item that you'll find in 11.4, is this VMware View logon page. Essentially what this logon page is doing is we know what the XML needs to be between a view client and a connection server. We're mimicking the connection server XML messages back and forth to the client. And so we're going to present different XML messages to different types of clients, and we're going to present different XML messages depending on how we want that client to connect and how we want it to authenticate. So we add that item. Perfect.
And now it shows up right there in the flow.
In the flow, you can see it right here, this VMware View logon page. And we can choose here, we can choose Windows password, RSA, secure ID, so radius, or we can put in disclaimer. Disclaimer, what a disclaimer is a message that, like, think of it as a message of the day. So you can put a message up there, you shouldn't access this resource if you're not allowed to, blah, blah, blah. It paints that picture in the View client before they're allowed to log on. Yeah. So if the customer wants to do that, they can do so. VMware calls it a pre-logon message in their XML. So it's just a pre-logon message saying, you know, if you're not authorized to access this resource, don't do so, or have a nice day. So we're going to choose Windows password, and what we're going to do here is put in a list of Windows domains. And those Windows domains that you put in here, in my environment, it's bd.f5.com. That's the Windows domain we're going to use. Okay. If you had multiple domains, you'd separate them by commas. Oh, excuse me, separated by spaces, not commas. Next thing we're going to do is click Save. So the next thing we need to do is actually choose what kind of authentication message. So we told this message essentially tells the View client, paint the screen for the Windows domain password. So present the screen that's going to have a username, password, and a domain name list in it. And now what we're going to do is choose what kind of authentication we're going to use. Well, we chose AD auth, so we choose the AD auth here. We click this add item. From the server list, we're going to choose that pool of Active Directory servers we created before. And we're going to click Save. Next thing we need to do is on the successful branch is we need to create an advanced resource assign. So we're going to search for an advanced resource assign by searching the search box. Choose that. We're going to add that item. Property comes up. We do add new entry. I'm going to click the add delete link. We're going to select a full Webtop. That full Webtop that we created earlier, we're going to select that there. And we'll choose update and save. Now, if you wanted to create another message after this, you could do, if you wanted to do two-factor authentication, you could put RSA or radius in the path here. We're not going to do that in this for this environment.
And then even on the fallback of the AD auth, you could also add the message either, wrong password, try again, you're outside, it's between, you're only allowed access between 9 and 5, whatever that granular quarantine or whatever is, you can add those messages there too, right?
Perfect. Yeah, you could make this as detailed and as granular as you wanted to, this policy. We're just doing a fairly simple policy that gets you access into the environment. So let's go ahead and create a disclaimer and actually show what that's going to look like on the view screen. So we're going to click we're going to add this view logon page again here. We're going to add that disclaimer, and in the disclaimer message field, we're going to type in the message that we want to display to the users.
And now they'll know.
They'll know. And here we need to change. So you notice these are all deny now. This is the only path that we want to be successful, and we want to allow it to connect. So we're going to click on the deny here, and we're going to change that to allow. And now we're allowing connectivity. When someone logs in, they'll see that message, they'll click OK, they'll go to a Windows logon screen. Yep. If they pass Active Directory authentication, we will assign them those resources, so the Webtop and the full Webtop assign, and they'll be allowed to connect. So that's what happens here with it's as simple as that. Last thing you got to do, something I often forget to do, is you make sure you click Apply Access Policy. Otherwise you'll start testing and wonder why it's not working. You have to apply that access policy. And we'll close that screen. So the next thing that needs to happen is we need to create a connectivity profile. So you go to Access Profiles, Secure Connectivity. And when it redraws, we're going to add a connectivity profile. We're going to give it a profile name. And from the parent profile, we're going to choose the default profile of common connectivity. We're going to leave the FEC profile alone because it's not licensed on here, forward error correction. And we're going to click OK.
And so all the stuff we've been doing up until here is more getting the system ready, creating all of the objects and pieces needed to then support this infrastructure, the authentication pieces, the web tops, and so forth. Now, this is the part where we're actually creating that secure connection with the backend servers. Yeah.
So what we've done, we've created a pool, and we've created basically the policy that allows certain people that pass AD off into allow them to connect to that pool. What we don't have is the virtual server on the front end side. Okay. So before we get there, there's one more step we've got to do. We've got to create a server side SSL profile, and there's a very specific field we have to fill in here. So we'll talk about that here in a second. So we're going to go create a server profile. So let's go to local traffic, profiles, SSL, server, and we're going to create a new server SSL profile. And choose advanced. And from this, we're going to choose the parent profile is going to be the base server SSL profile. Okay. So we're going to leave that there. In the advanced field, we've got to scroll down and find the server name. And in this server name field, we need to enter, and this is very specific, it's something that Teradata is requiring us to do in order to identify that it's coming from us to the back-end server. We have to enter PCoIP default SNI. And so PC over IP default SNI, and that has to be in the server profile name.
And then those of you who are watching, if you hadn't noticed, you'll see many of these particular fields grayed out. And what Paul did was actually on the right here, if you check that little box, that's what then enables you to enter the information in those fields.
Right. It allows you to take, and so this is based off, all the answers that are in gray are those that come as part of the server SSL parent profile. And then we go through and we can change specific fields in there to meet our specific needs. This is the only one we need to change. So we click the box here, and then we add the detail there. Go down and click Finished. And now the View 5.2 server SSL profile is there. Server-side SSL profile is there. So now we're getting to the point where we create that front door. We create that virtual server that the clients will connect to in order to then run through that access policy and get access to our pool of servers. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to create a new virtual server. That virtual server is going to be a 443 virtual server. And it's going to allow the View client to connect on port 443 and exchange the authentication XML messages. And that's what's going to happen there. It's also going to be the PC over IP TCP XML channel.
Okay.
In a lot of environments, if you've been around View for a long time, you know that that's generally a 4172 TCP port, not UDP, TCP. And that's where some standard encryption takes place and some passing of keys back and forth and checking them in the PC over IP protocol. It's kind of some black magic we can't discuss. But we're doing that black magic now on the BIG-IP. So there's no need to do that on the 4172 TCP channel. We're going to do that within the 443. Instead of having 3 virtual servers, a 443, a 4172 TCP, and a 4172 UDP virtual server, we're going to do it with 2. We're going to do it with a 443 TCP and a 4172 UDP virtual server. So that's why we're going to create 2 instead of 3.
First the gray line and then the green line, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
on the
gray line. We're doing the gray line now, then we'll do the green line.
All right.
So we're going to run through this. We're going to create a new virtual server, and we're going to give it a name. I gave it View 5.2 HTTPS. We're going to choose here the IP address that we want to use. In my case, that is this. So that's the address that I have provisioned for that. I've got a DNS entry in my DNS server that points PC over IP underscore proxy.bd.f5.com resolves to this IP address. Because I have a wildcard DNS SSL certificate on here, that works for us.
Yep.
All right. Put in the address. We choose an HTTP profile. We want just the standard HTTP profile. From the SSL client profile, remember earlier I had created a wildcard client SSL profile.
Yep.
And on the server profile, we want this View 5.2 server profile. In our environment, we're going to choose to auto map these for SNAT. And here we go. This is from the access profile list. We're going to choose that access profile we created, the connectivity profile that we created earlier, and here we've got a VDI and Java support checkbox. This tells the BIG-IP that this virtual will be used for VMware View, or were we to set up a Citrix virtual, you'd have to check this for Citrix as well, or an RDP, a Java-based RDP. You could set that up. But we're going to check that box, make sure we get that checked. Policies, default persistence profile. We're going to choose cookie for our default persistence profile. And we're going to click Finished. No, because the pool's being assigned by by the Webtop.
Oh, from the other.
Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
we don't assign the pool here. It's being assigned by the Webtop through that access policy.
Gotcha.
So we click Finished. We have to then create another one. So now we're creating the UDP-based virtual. This is the PC over IP virtual. And we put in a host address. We make sure we put in the same address that we had earlier. That address is 172.30.128. 20.16. Service port is going to be 4172. It's UDP, and we need to have advanced. We'll need to have this VDI checkbox checked again. And snap. Where did snap go? Source address translation to automap for my environment, and we click finished. So again, VDI and Java support important in this environment for this one, and we don't assign it a pool. That's done again by the access policy. And there you go. We're set up, ready to go.
Right on.
Yeah. Okay, so we've created everything. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up this client. It's running in my lab there. We're going to launch the VMware View client, and we're going to connect to that DNS name that I had created earlier in DNS, PC over IP Proxy. And we're going to go ahead and connect. My username is DD. Put in my super secure password, if I can remember to click in there. We click log on. And we went through that entire process. The end user notices no difference whatsoever.
Yep.
So the end user, to the end user, this is the exact same process that they've been going through. They get to click and choose the desktops that they're entitled to. This user's entitled to this desktop, and we'll connect to that desktop, and we'll connect through the BIG-IP back into the desktop. There you go. Now the user has the ability to, on their system, connect to a virtual desktop and work from there.
That's pretty cool. So there are certainly a number of steps that were involved, and you know, many of how to deploy and configure the BIG-IP is also can be driven by IAPs. Is there an IAP for this?
There is an IAP for this coming. So it's in development right now. So the IAP team, the PME team, is working on developing that IAP and getting it tested, and they'll post it to downloads and Dev Central and the usual places that you'll find an IAP like that. Don't quite have a time frame on that. We're hoping that we'll have it mid-June, late June.
And that would then essentially, you would select the IAP and fill in the certain fields, the requested pieces of information, you know, essentially next, and it would then create all of these pieces for the administrator.
Right, all of the basic pieces for the administrator that need to happen that I had to go through and do, like creating that client's or that server-side SSL profile with that specific PC over IP -default -SNI field in that server field.
Yep.
It would do that automatically.
Cool.
User wouldn't have to remember to do that. User's not going to have to walk through a document with 20 to 30 page document on how to do this and miss a step or two here and there and get it figured out. So the IAP will take care of that for them.
The beauty of IAPs, eh?
Love IAPs. The other nice thing about IAPs, shout out to IAPs, is that it will then keep all of the objects, all of the F5 objects in what we call an application service. So you can drill into that application service and see the health of the application itself and all of the objects that are all grouped together, and you can see that, oh, this one server's down. And in one place, you can see the health of the entire application.
Pretty darn cool stuff.
It is.
Wow. And actually, you know, it's also kind of cool that we're the only vendor that can provide this native support with PCoIP for those VMware View.
Right. So we're the only vendor that's providing support this native PC over IP proxy that provides it on a hardened security device in your DMZ. We allow you to flatten your infrastructure, get rid of that firewall if you want to. We allow you to get rid of those View security servers in the DMZ. That's for every View pod, that's 7 fewer VMs that you've got to deploy.
Right.
You're doing SSL offload on the BIG-IP, so there's no SSL processing going on the View connection servers. Lowers the amount of CPU and RAM that those are required to use. Again, means you can add density, so you're increasing the VM density on your ESX hosts, your ESXi hosts.
Pretty cool stuff, Paul. Wow. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, an inside look at the BIG-IP Access Policy Manger's PCoIP support for the VMware Horizon View client. And the BIG-IP, the PCoIP support is available in our brand new 11.4 software.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't mention is we showed you accessing this from a Windows client. This will also work from the Mac client, from an iOS client, from the Android client, the Linux client. All of those clients are able to also connect to this PC over IP proxy and use it from there. So it does enable a true bring your own device solution. So you bring your device, you can point it to the BIG-IP, and it'll get you connected to your View desktop.
Cool. I'm going to try it out later. I really appreciate you coming by, Paul. So once again, the BIG-IP APM version 11.4, the PCoIP native support for the VMware Horizon View client. So for Paul, I'm Peter, and we're with F5 Networks. Thanks for watching.